As a side note, what would be a great way to solve that problem?
Give it a geostationary orbit so you're always in contact with the ground station.
That's going to be super duper expensive and possibly outside of our constraints. Any other thoughts?
Have a whole bunch of satellites.
That's another idea, but that's super expensive.
Yeah. Small and like very cost efficient, you know, just swarm.
Why do we have the problem with the gap? Think about what's causing your problem.
Changing the orbit of it?
Nope.
Having multiple ground stations.
Yeah, multiple ground stations.
We got one in the United States. We need one on the other side of the planet. You find someone in Russia or Central Asia and you give them a couple $1 million, it costs significantly less than putting another satellite in orbit. Now, the idea behind this was it's people doing this out of their garage or whatever, but it's like, go on the internet and find someone who, apparently you don't need super expensive equipment to get this signal. Have someone on the far side of the planet that's actually paying attention to it. Heck, even if you get someone in Australia, get 2 ground sites, one in Australia and one in Italy or something. Done.
Pay them $20.
You are no longer dropping 3/4 of your data. And setting up someone with a small satellite dish or whatever, probably a couple $1,000s. And a volunteer. But I'd imagine for this, you'd find some volunteers. I merely bring that up. You all can't do that in real life, but that's also why, like, I'm saying that what we were given was, by my consideration, and the data that we get back, a bad scenario. But it becomes a perfectly good scenario if you add one more ground station on the other side of the planet. Why do you not do that? Well, because it's blocking you all from actually doing the problem solving, which is what we want. So I don't expect them to give you a good scenario every time. Sometimes you're just going to be limited, and I talked with my spouse about this, and she was like, okay, but if the best you can do is dropping 75% of your data, then you still do that. That's the best you can do. And that's not wrong. All right. We're rapidly running out of time, and I wanted to give extra stuff real quick. I'll take a couple minutes to go through some of the terminology and ideas for the powering systems, but any other questions on this? People feeling okay? Again, if you are trying to do something like this, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, do all of the math set up first so that you don't have to go through and individually check all of them. What you get out is going to be complete trash, but then highlight the whole thing, sort and filter by your start time. And then that way it's putting them in chronological order. So you're going to have plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus. And then when you hit the dark period, it's going to be plus, 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 minus, 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 plus, minus, whatever. Right? That make sense? All right. Because that's also going to be very important when it comes to the satellites. Because instead of filling the tank, and you don't want to get the tank too full because you're dropping stuff, instead you're draining the tank. And that's powering your satellite. And if your battery goes empty, your satellite goes into standby mode, and that can be super bad for it.
Usually about 50% of your score.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it gets bad. So, a couple of things that I want to bring up. You will have power input. That's coming most likely from where?
The sun.
The sun. So your solar panels specifically, and then you'll need to check your lighting times for that. So you won't have a constant input of power. And depending on how your orbit is set up, it might be a bit different. You might have a constant input in power if it's a nearly polar orbit and it's oriented correctly, but I really doubt they're going to do that. I think they're going to force you to actually analyze that. You've got your tank, and you may have multiple outputs. The other thing that you're going to be working with on this is probably you're going to be dealing with things like watts and kilowatt hours and so forth. So let's talk about that rather briefly. There's a good bet that what they may end up doing is your power input might be in kilowatts. Your power storage might be in kilowatt hours. And your consumption out is probably in watts. It depends on what your equipment is. And you may have to choose several components that have a power consumption. They also many times have a background where they say, okay, there's an onboard computer, there's an onboard something else. And so there'll be a set amount of power that you have to budget for as well, independent of your choices. Okay? Big thing on this. 1 kilowatt is equal to 1,000 watts. They should also have that in the mission brief, and you can Google it. It's not that difficult. But what you can do is if you've got 30 minutes that you're in the sun and your solar panels generate 1 kilowatt whenever they're in the sun, you have 30 minutes times 1 kilowatt is 30 kilowatt minutes. That is a unit of energy, because it is a power times a time, for those of you familiar with it. But watt times a time gets you a representation of how much energy you have. Okay, are we used to seeing it in kilowatt minutes?
No.
What are we used to seeing? Kilowatt hours. All you have to do, 60 minutes, 1 hour. It's that chemistry stuff. Related rates, whatever you want to call it. We get
Disgusting.
0.5 kilowatt hours. Everyone okay on that? To my knowledge, if they're really being jerks, then they'll give you something in amp and volts. But all the times I've seen it before, they've actually worked it out. In case they do, 1 volt times 1 amp is 1 watt. I really don't think that they're going to make you do that. If they do, I might actually chime in a little bit and help you on that one, because that I think is a little bit jerk-faced. But SI system. I think that's the main thing that I wanted to mention on that. Any other thoughts, questions, input? Sir?
Do you think there's going to be a bonus for budget managing?
Hopefully.
What they'll probably do is one of your power consuming things might be your computer or your transmitter, and they're probably going to have a bonus factor based on what computer you have or what transmitter. So basically they're trying to push you to draw a lot of power. The thing that takes a lot of power is going to be the thing that gets you a bonus. It's doing the job better. But you're limited by how much power you can actually get put into it, that sort of thing. So I fully expect that there will be a bonus. Last thing I'm going to bring up is this. Batteries. They don't last forever. They have a lifetime. So you have an input and output. It's a cycle. It's a duty cycle. For our purposes, every orbit is going to be, yes, it's with a T. I assume that's why you all are laughing. Duty cycle. All right. Every orbit is probably going to be one of the cycles. Basically, that represents how many times you actually put things in and then take them out and then start the whole thing over again. That same idea of cycles, okay? Then they'll probably give you, the cheaper batteries are going to have a shorter lifespan. The longer batteries are going to have a longer lifespan. Your actual scenario time is probably going to be like 2 weeks like usual, but they will probably say, we want this, we're going to put the satellite up there, analyze it for 2 weeks, but it's supposed to do this job for 8 years. And you'll check whether or not your battery is going to last that long. Now that will be a function of how many cycles you've actually got set up. I doubt you all are controlling the orbit, however, so that'll probably be a set number. You just have to find it and incorporate it. I think that's all the key things for the electrical system. Anything else?
No. To answer Gabe's question earlier about any extra bonuses, they might throw, if you have extra costs, you get a bonus. If you get
Oh yeah, that was the other thing that was weird, where it was like, you get no benefit for coming in under budget.
on the track one, there is nothing for saying spend all of your money. But on this one, they might say, oh, you've got $500 million extra dollars. Here's an extra 20 points.
Yeah.
There was a bonus for being underweight, though, wasn't there?
No.
I don't think so.
It was
I think
just
the only bonus was in the camera.
Yeah.
Okay. If you all had anything that you needed to discuss about the academic, although I would recommend that you come up with a plan. Maybe take just a couple minutes to talk with one another, and then we'll do the dismissal.
If you guys do not have your sheet of paper, you guys lost it. I was gonna email them a copy.
Okay.
I'll email you guys all a copy tonight, probably before midnight.
Probably.